Hello, folks. Good evening. You're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. My name is Habib Enyola. Today, we're going to be discussing MSAS again. Yes, it's still an ongoing story, or should I call it a drama? It's worried a lot of people. Initially, it started, and a lot of people were hopeful that something great was coming, especially because it was a peaceful protest. Young people organized themselves, so much so that they had a steady supply of food, water, security, ambulances, even legal advisors. If the rumors I heard were correct, probably numbering roughly around 500 lawyers that were actually willing to work with them pro bono to see how they could help them to end SARS. But end SARS now morphed into something else. End SARS initially was to stop that special anti-robbery squad that was terrorizing people that a lot of people had complaints about all over the nation. But then the youth saw it as an opportunity for them to be able to look at the government and say, you know what, we need to change a few more things. It's not just the SARS. The SARS is just an offshoot of how bad the system has become. A lot of rot in the system. A lot of people had so much to complain about in different sectors across board, from the police to the customs to immigration, even NAFTAC, civil service. So many stories, a lot of horror stories. So they rose up, came out, and the most prominent of the locations where they actually were was Lekki toll gate. The events that have happened at that Lekki toll gate has disturbed the entire world. Now the NSAS protests have gone global. The likes of Lewis Hamilton is wearing today his 92nd win. He made history with the 92nd win because he outdone Peter Schmeichel. I said Schmeichel, sorry. Schumacher. But he now decided that he had to put a little extra into that glory for him, which was exposing the MSAS t-shirt that he was wearing with the Nigerian map and the flag in it. So the whole world is watching, the whole world is listening. A lot has happened after that Lekki crisis, because that's what I see it as, the crisis. A group of young protesters going about their business peacefully because it's a fundamental human right to be able to protest. And videos started to show up of soldiers coming there and opening fire whilst the lights were turned off at the toll plaza. A lot has happened since then. Almost total breakdown of law and order in so many states. Lagos, Cross River, Edo, Kwara, Plateau, and the list goes on and on. We're going to be talking to a seasoned journalist who is also a writer and is also a broadcaster. He's been very active on the social scene as a social activist, actually, doing a lot of work, especially on Twitter, where he lets his voice be heard at every given opportunity, talking about the social ills in Nigeria. He also was an investigative journalist, but of course, anybody that knows Nigeria knows how tough that can be. You really, really, really have to have a strong passion and an extra deep pocket for it to be an investigative journalist in Nigeria. So, of course, that tells you quite a bit about the character of the man called David Hundeyin. I'm going to welcome David Hundeyin to the studio. Hello, David.
Hi, Habib.
How are you today?
I'm not bad, thank you.
Interesting times for Nigeria.
That's that's one way of putting it. Yes, very much so.
As a journalist, you would agree with me that a lot of the times you will have to put your emotions aside and try to strike a balance when you are giving a report or trying to get your view across to the general public.
Mm.
This has been rather difficult for practically any journalist that actually wants to do that at this point in time. It's supposed to be a historical moment, but then we are seeing different things happening. Social media is exploding with all sorts of video clips, all sorts of text, all sorts of emojis, all sorts of memes. What really happened at Lekki?
Well, to cut a very long story short, because I'm not a fan of equivocation, unnecessary equivocation. What happened at Lekki Tollgate was that a group of protesters stayed out, had said that they would stay out beyond the hastily imposed curfew. They had said that since after the curfew was announced. And the curfew that was announced to start at 4 p.m. was then shifted to 9 p.m. Around 7 p.m., which by the way was still 2 hours before the curfew was supposed to take place, was supposed to take effect at 9 p.m. The CCTV cameras at the Lekki toll gate had been taken out, the lights had been switched off, and the group of protesters who were there still doing what they have been doing for the past couple of weeks, were singing the national anthem, were waving their flags as they have been doing for the past couple of weeks. And as has been documented from several eyewitness accounts and through several eyewitness videos, independently verified, a military convoy pulled up and opened fire on unarmed civilian protesters in the central business district of Lagos, Nigeria, in what is supposed to be a civilian electoral democracy in the year 2020. That is what happened. Now, the second part of what happened is after the shooting, as is the habit of the Nigerian military, whenever it commits an atrocity of that manner, some of the bodies that were the people who were shot, the military actually took some of the bodies, the ones they could get their hands on, and got rid of them. Now, where they got rid of them is a matter for it's a question only they can answer. But the reason I am so confident that this is what happened, apart from the eyewitness accounts stating that this is what happened, is that it has been well documented over a period of years that this is how the Nigerian army does its business. There is a Premium Times report from the year 2017. In the wake of the Shiite massacre in Zaria, Kaduna, there was
Yeah.
a panel of inquiry set up by the Kaduna state government to establish exactly what happened. Now, if you recall, at the time, the military said, at first they said nobody died. Then they said, oh, well, 7 people died. That's what, and till today, that's the official position of the Nigerian army, that 7 people died. However, the panel constituted by the Kaduna state government found and reported that 347 people were killed. They received 347 bodies, which they buried in a mass grave. That is from the Kaduna state government, right? That's not some random person on the street saying that. This is an official document from the
300 plus, 300 plus.
347 people were shot or burnt alive by the Nigerian military. 347 bodies were received by the Kaduna state government, which then buried them in the mass grave. So the Nigerian military has formed for this kind of action where it commits a civilian massacre, an atrocity, a war crime of that manner. Then to hide the evidence of the crime it has committed, it then goes and hides the bodies, burns down the location where the atrocity took place, and then comes to the world and says, oh, nothing happened. And if anyone, like a journalist or an eyewitness, comes out and says, hey, but this happened, then they immediately brand you fake news. That's what they've been doing for years now. So this is nothing different. The only reason this was perhaps a bit surprising was the optics of it.
Yeah.
The fact that this is not just Lagos, this is Lekki, this is possibly the most upscale, well, not the most upscale, but the largest middle class district in probably the whole of Nigeria. I don't think
Yeah.
it's an exaggeration to say that.
Yeah.
And that toll gate is possibly the most visible location, possibly in all of Lagos, if not Nigeria. It's an immediately recognizable location. Everybody knows what it is, where it is, what it represents. right? It's if there was such a, I think the only, you wouldn't call it an iconic location like maybe the Lekki Koili Bridge, or or the statue of the three men, but immediately you see it, you know exactly what it is, right?
But it has become
So
iconic because of the recent events.
unfortunately, but prior to that, you might not have called it that. But why I'm stressing this is that you ordinarily would not have thought that even the Nigerian military, with its history of doing the things that it does, would have thought that the optics of going to the Lekki toll gate and committing a civilian massacre in the middle of Lekki was, you wouldn't have thought anyone would have actually signed off on such an order. But obviously,
Yeah.
that is what happened, and what that tells me more than anything else is that Nigeria is now in a situation where the people in charge are completely out of control. I somehow believe that regardless of how reckless and unhandled and bloodthirsty Nigerian soldiers historically have been and can be, that when it came to that day, because as soon as the curfew was announced, and I knew that the military was going to enforce the curfew, I thought that there might be a problem, there might be an issue. But then I thought, do you know what? This is Lekki, right? And they know that everybody in Lekki has a smartphone, everybody's always taking pictures, everybody's always streaming. This is not the place
Yeah.
where they will do like a Zaria kind of thing. Because that actually crossed my mind. And I said, nah, I remember talking to a friend and I actually said they're not going to pull a Zaria here. I was quite sure of that. I specifically used the term Zaria. They're not going to do that because, well, this is Lekki. Why would I thought there was an adult in the room who would seize control of the situation at some point and say, "Hey, guys, you know what? Even if we really want to do this, we can't do it. Right? Not here." I thought that's what was going to happen. And if I tell you that till now it hasn't quite sunk in, I haven't quite accepted the full gravity of what it was that took place. It hasn't quite sunk in fully yet. Because I was and I still am so stunned at the
But
sheer
there have been
lack.
but there have been a lot of claims and counterclaims.
Yes.
Now, for me personally speaking, that is, I find it very worrisome that in the first place you would even have soldiers on ground. But then again, having a deeper look at it, if the people were actually complaining about the police, rebelling against the police, who else would the government have sent to that environment to try to calm things down? But even if they were going to calm things down, I've known several fine soldiers over the years, a lot of them very, very good close friends, some childhood friends, who are senior military officers now. And I could never imagine at any point in time that they would even know any military officer who would give an order to open fire on a civilian crowd, much
That's
less.
exactly what I meant when I said that I feel as if there are no adults in the room anymore. I feel as if this institution is now completely out of control. It doesn't mean that there are no good soldiers. It doesn't mean that all Nigerian soldiers are bloodthirsty hacks. What it does mean is that in the commanding structure, there is now a vacuum of leadership, right? I don't think it's so much a case of someone actively giving an order to go and commit, a civilian massacre, as it was a case of somebody not giving the order to not do something foolish. I think by
Right.
default, by default, those soldiers were always going to do something like that. And I think it was up to the chief of army staff and the high command structure to put their foot down and to be the adults in the room and to say, no, we cannot do this. But I feel as if the tail has started to wag the dog. There are no adults in the room anymore. Anything is possible now. And that's what terrifies me about all of this because if you can do this, then pretty much nothing is sacrosanct anymore. We cannot really say that there's anything that we know of as Nigeria that we're confident that by next week is still going to be Nigeria, right? Any of the social freedoms or the human rights or anything that we take for granted currently under our 21-year-old democracy. Are we still going to have it when we wake up tomorrow? You may or you may not. We actually cannot say anymore because this
So
is this,
we're one step away from a dictatorship. Is that what you mean?
that's exactly what I mean. Yes, and it honestly gives me no pleasure to say this whatsoever because I mean I grew up in the 90s. I remember what dictatorship was like. Right, I remember my parents would be having a conversation and they'd mention the word abacha and they would literally whisper it under their breath in case maybe the wind carried it and maybe one of the neighbors heard it or something. We're inside our own house, but to say the name of the head of state was a risky thing to do because people were going missing and getting murdered every day. All sorts of crazy things were happening. I remember what dictatorship was like. Right, nobody wants to go back to that. Unfortunately, the slide toward dictatorship is unmistakable. It was already unmistakable before this. In fact, this is kind of like this is in many ways this is the final event that usually defines a dictatorship. Right? You usually don't expect this to come this early. So which is why now everybody's just kind of stunned, not least me, and it's kind of wondering, okay, so what now? I mean, Robert Mugabe or Muammar Gaddafi, even they, as bloodthirsty and murderous as they weren't going around shooting civilians all the time. And those things happened, but they happened on rare occasions. It wasn't. But under 5 years of the current administration, this has been happening, right? And perhaps it's our fault as people, as individuals, and as media people. Perhaps it's our fault as well that we haven't told these stories, right? Because when you hear that 349 Shiites were killed in Zaria, it sounds like 349 cockroaches died or something. 349 ants were stepped on or something. It doesn't feel like 349 human beings lost their lives, right? But that is exactly what happened.
Oh
When you
wow.
hear that there was a there was an IPOB massacre in Enugu or in Aba or in Port Harcourt or in Onitsha, and they killed 30 IPOB members or they killed 10 this or that. It doesn't sound like human beings lost their lives. Like people's fathers and mothers and sisters and friends and work colleagues were shot by the Nigerian military, civilians, right? Because that is what happened. Instead, it just
Okay,
sounds
so
like, well, yes,
David, this counter claims that are coming from the Nigerian military. We're gonna
yes,
play a quick video and then we're gonna have a little talk about that because a general in the Nigerian armed forces
yes.
actually came out and debunked these claims. We'll be right back.
So if there was anything, if it is true, why am I saying if it is true? Because up till this morning before I came here, I even got analysts, people that have analyzed the various videos that were cropped, that what do you call it, that were Photoshop put together. If not because I'm not permitted, I would have forwarded it to it. I can forward it to you, send it to them. People who took interest. If this thing is true that they actually shot, they have done the analysis, they are on standby. And conclusively, it's according to them, not me, it is a lie.
So David, that was
Yes.
General Paul Medenche, and he says that it is quote unquote a lie. Now, the question that a few people have asked is this: they still haven't seen any families come forward to say my child is dead.
No,
Why
of
is
course they
that
haven't.
happening?
Of course they haven't, because as I said, most of the bodies that that were confirmed by eyewitnesses to have been dead were taken away by the military. So of course there are no bodies to identify as dead. This is what the Nigerian military has done consistently for the past 4 or 5 years. They erase evidence of what they did, right? And by the way, like if the defense is that, oh well, no families have come forward to say that my child is dead, well, there are several families that have come forward to say that my child or my son, my friend, my brother, or whatever is missing. There have been several reports like that,
Yeah.
several. More than 10 that I've counted
We've
today.
had some
Several.
yeah.
And by the way, there have also been bodies discovered that is. I was watching a video just today. A guy who was involved in the cleanup effort yesterday came across a body, a dead body, right there in Lekki. Right? It
At
wasn't the
that toll
protesters
plaza.
that killed him. Yes, at that toll plaza with a bullet wound and caked blood. The body was obviously was blackened. Obviously, I've been lying there for like 2 or 3 days, so it matches the time of the shooting. So, who shot that person? So one thing I really dislike about how the Nigerian army does its propaganda, if you like, because propaganda is actually like an integral part of warfare. Even though Nigeria is technically not at war with anyone, but Nigeria has then
Yeah.
turned its military inwards and is using war tactics on itself against its own citizens. One thing I particularly dislike about how the Nigerian military does things is that the Nigerian military insults our intelligence. It insults people's intelligence a lot, right? The Nigerian military will look at you, looking at something happen live in front of your eyes, and will tell you that what you saw, you didn't really see it, and that is fake news, right? That type of gaslighting, I find it very pernicious, very irritating. I find it devilish. I find it highly annoying, right? If you, there are some situations where if you are really smart, if you are as smart as you think you are, how you would handle it is like in this case, you would say you are not aware of which of the
Yeah.
unit that did so and so. Maybe it was a rogue unit. You are doing investigations or whatever, blah blah blah. That's what the really smart army would have done, right? Not that come you come out and say, oh, the video is photoshopped, and then start, and then different people
I
pop
found
up
that
out
I found that pretty amazing because first things first, there are so many people who have come out and they have made statements. So Lagos State Governor has made statements. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo has made a statement, and on and on and on like that. And all of them kept referring to the people that have lost their lives.
yes.
So whose information is wrong? Is President Obasanjo wrong? Is the President Governor of Lagos State wrong when they are saying things like the people who have lost their lives? And then the army is saying, no, it has nothing to do with us. Like the song, it wasn't me.
They're
How
not
could
even
they do that?
saying, they're not even saying it wasn't me, right? What they're saying is that it didn't happen, which is even worse. They're saying it didn't happen. It's all in your head. You imagined it. The video that you saw, it was Photoshop. I don't know how you Photoshop a live streaming Instagram video, but apparently, DJ Switch managed to do that. However, that is done. The second corroborating Instagram live video, which has since emerged, which shows the exact same events, perhaps that was Photoshop too. The dozens of videos that were taken documenting the trip of the army units in question from Bonny Camp to
Yeah.
the toll gate. There have been several of those videos. Maybe they were all Photoshop too. I mean, what a coincidence it is that hundreds of Nigerians were, concurrently photoshopping live videos at the same time. How amazing
So
is that?
the soldiers came from Bonny Camp.
Yes, that has
But what
been
side
well established.
what side of the plaza were the protesters?
So, from what the video shows, the protesters were, if you are coming from Sandfield, if you are coming from Victoria Island, they were largely on the other side
Yeah.
of the plaza. Although they were also like a few of them
Oh,
were
right.
also directly in front of the plaza. And then they show that the soldiers show up.
Okay.
There's actually a video which I suspect was shot by a soldier, showing, because it was shot from behind the soldiers, showing them walking up to the crowd, taking out the rifles and then firing into the air. Right? And I suspect the reason that video was released was to create plausible deniability that, well, even if it is established that we were here, we didn't actually shoot at the protesters. We shot in the air to scare them. I believe that's why that video was released, because it was clearly shot by a soldier. But either way, that in itself was a tactical mistake because it proves that the soldiers were there, right? A civilian cannot have been shooting a video from behind the soldiers, directly behind them, walking like less than 3 meters behind them. It's not possible. So obviously that video was
Well,
shot by a soldier.
let's take a look at that particular video that you're talking about. We'll have a quick look at that video again. We'll be right back. An amazing video.
Right.
Soldiers holding rifle, muzzle flashes in the air.
Yes.
So whether they were shooting into the air or they were shooting into the crowd, we can't really say at this point in time. But what we do know is a lot of people have been reported injured. Now, if people have been reported injured from gunshot wounds, what's the possibility that people are not dead?
You have to ask the Nigerian army and
Why is there
General
why is
Eneche
there
that
such a
question.
deep deniability of that? It's amazing that they would come out and say that type of video was photoshopped. I mean, that blew my mind because I was not like, okay, fine. If you say that
So
was
this
photoshopped,
this has been happening.
who are those
This
video gurus?
this has been
Who are the
happening
video
for
gurus that could do that kind of Photoshop? And Nollywood
this has
is
been
doing
happening
it.
for a long time now. Actually, it didn't even start with this administration. This has been happening for close to a decade. The Nigerian military has a problem, first of all, with basic truthfulness, telling the truth about anything. I mean, the Nigerian military even lies about the soldiers that it loses. Right? A soldier will die in action, and the Nigerian military will lie to the public that it didn't happen. You know, there are soldiers whose remains were never recovered and nothing happened. Everybody moved on. The Nigerian military has a big institutional problem with any kind of accountability, even within itself. That is one thing. And then the second thing is, in terms of its communication, its public communication, I remember under the last administration, the Nigerian military used to do this thing where maybe there's a Boko Haram attack. I remember there was a big one in, I think it was Bama, either Bama or
Yeah.
Konduga, is a town in Borno. And I remember AFP, AP, like all the and Reuters, all the major international news agencies were reporting that more than 200 people, civilians, were killed by Boko Haram, right? And the Nigerian military came out and had this huge publicity blitz, stating, "Oh no, these are enemies of Nigeria. They are putting out fake news, blah blah blah. That yes, there was an attack, but the death toll wasn't more than 20. They don't know where they got that 200 figure from, blah blah blah. This racist foreign press trying to use Nigeria to make headlines, blah 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 blah." And I remember at a point, I actually almost got, I not almost, I actually got sucked into that narrative. That oh, it's the foreign press that are somehow victimizing Nigeria. They're using Nigeria for clickbait, by inflating the number of dead Africans there, because after all, who cares about dead Africans? Only for me to then have the opportunity to have a private conversation with somebody who actually worked in Borno at the time. He was working in the aid sector. He was working for an NGO that was involved in Borno State. And he said, even that 200 figure is a conservative estimate. And that this is how it always happens. Both, whether it's Boko Haram that is doing the killing or it's Nigerian military that does the killing.
Conservative. The
Yeah,
conservative estimate.
yeah. That whether it's Boko Haram doing the killing or whether it's even the Nigerian army doing the killing, the number of deaths are always underestimated. There's always a conservative estimate that is put out to the public. And people die like flies, but you don't hear it in Lagos. I remember him telling me that. So I guess they've got used to getting away with that kind of thing in all the places they've been getting away with in. So they've been doing it in Borno. There was no blowback. They've been doing it in Aba, in Enugu. There's no blowback. They did it in Kaduna, in Zaria State. There was no blowback. So I guess it was only a matter of time before it got here to Lagos. And now that it has got here, the question is now, where do we go from here? What do we do now? Because I think that's what will define the remainder of this administration in particular. Because the problem now is that now that the volume of evidence that is emerging that a civilian massacre took place is so it's so voluminous now. Obviously, the Nigerian army is not used to having this volume of evidence against it. They are used to it just being their word against somebody else's word. So maybe
Yeah.
someone like Ahmed Salkida, that's the journalist that reports on the on the northeastern conflict zone. Maybe he reports a story and then they will take a screen grab of the story and then put fake news all over it, and then it's their word against Salkidas. So and then it cancels out. Everybody moves on. But in this case, it's their word against maybe the 100,000 people. So it's not that easy. So eventually, and then the international media has picked up the story and they're not letting it go. So the danger now is that it's either of two outcomes. Either the president has to accept that this happened and then has to hold somebody accountable for it, which he obviously would rather die than do. He does not want to do that. Or the president is going to dig his heels in and actually become a sort of like pseudo civilian dictator, clamp down on press freedom, clamp down on the social media space, trying to stop people from talking about it. That's the fear now. Start, kidnapping and disappearing journalists. The sort of thing that you expect from Buhari because he has form for it. That's what the fear is now. So the question is now, so what I in particular am trying to do now is to keep on to not lose my voice, to continue speaking up, to maintain the sort of like, because I believe that over the past 8 to 10 years, the growth of internet access in Nigeria has made, especially the younger generation, get used to the idea of having a voice. Has made them get used to some basic freedoms that we
Yeah.
never had, that we never used to have before, right? And the more these freedoms grow, the more democracy grows, the better the country becomes, right? So I feel like if you allow this sort of incident to sort of cow you into silence, then I think they've won. So what I and my colleagues and hopefully you as well are trying to do is keep up the pressure, continue talking. You know, don't let this sort of cow you into submission.
Yeah.
Wow, okay,
We,
if they
we,
could do this,
we,
then
should, we,
maybe I'm next.
we should keep the conversation going because what I see is, like I said to you earlier on, a momentous time in Nigeria's history. And I do believe that for something like this to have happened at this point in time, then that means there's a lot of hope for Nigeria. The generation that a lot of people had their doubts about in terms of their capability, they've come out and they proved everybody wrong in terms of their organizational abilities, their level of initiative, and how they were able to structure the protests in such a way that they were largely peaceful until things took a different turn. Now, we're going to go on a very short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the after effects of that day, 2010, 2020, everything that's been going on around the nation, looting, arson, all sorts of crime. We'll be back shortly after the break. Hello, folks. Good evening. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to another edition of Just Banter. Today we're discussing NSAS, the 2010 2020 tragedy. A lot has been said, claims, counterclaims, and people are still trying to figure out what exactly has happened. But a lot has happened after what has happened: looting, arson, crime. It's unbelievable the level of stuff that's going on. We are inundated with videos all over social media. So many videos. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos on social media, David.
I have, unfortunately, I've seen perhaps a bit too many of them.
A very disturbing trend, don't you think?
Yes, particularly because, um, so if you're familiar with how civil conflicts usually build up in Africa, and I'm saying this as someone who at the point was obsessed with watching these sort of like historical documentaries about conflicts in Africa. So the conflict in Liberia, the conflict in Sierra Leone, the conflict in Rwanda, the conflict in the DRC, the conflict in Angola, Mozambique. A common denominator is not the common denominator, but a common denominator
Yeah.
that cuts across all these conflicts is that at some point, the generality of the population in these countries suddenly just stops respecting some basic social norms, some basic societal norms, such as this belongs to this person, so it's not mine to take, right? That basic concept of property rights, that this is
Yeah.
mine, so I can't take it. They stop respecting that, and then everybody starts taking everything by force because they can, right? And the important thing to note is that it isn't just like angry young men. It's also like if you saw those videos yesterday and today, it's women carrying children on their back, it's men with their kids, it's pregnant women, it's all sorts of regular everyday people who are going around stealing people's private property, right? It was one thing when it was like the palliatives, you could argue that what palliatives are theirs anyway, so you could turn a blind eye to that, even though it's not ideal, but well. But then it graduated to invading people's private warehouses. I saw a video. I believe it was the warehouse for Sonic's cookers, right? So
Okay.
the guy who imports the Sonic's brand of cookers into Nigeria has a big warehouse in Lagos. I think it's somewhere called Ado or something like that in Lagos. It's close to Ojo, and his warehouse was broken into, and there's a video of like just this huge stream of hundreds of people carrying cookers on their heads, you know, streaming
Wow.
out of streaming out of his warehouse. And that video terrified me because like this is exactly how it happens in those places where a conflict is building. People just stop respecting the idea of property rights, those basic societal norms. And then from there, if it then some bright spark realizes that hey, if I want this cooker and I can just take it, then
Yeah.
what if I want this woman? I can just take her, and then from there you start having mass rapes and stuff because there's that complete breakdown of the idea of personal ownership, personal agency. Everybody starts taking whatever the hell they want as long as they can. Force, might becomes right. And then and when that spirals, across the society and and it gains steam, then from there the the complete breakdown is almost inevitable. So what usually causes it in those other cases the is that the police or the military or whatever has already sort of collapsed. So then the people themselves then start to implode. In this case, the Nigerian police has not collapsed. The Nigerian military clearly has not collapsed, but the police apparently are under instructions to stand down. Now, the instruction apparently, and I know this because I have, a source who is close to the police. The instruction to them was to stand down. The instruction was not that they should abandon their duty post. The instruction was that they should stand down, that they shouldn't shoot people anymore, at least for now. They should not open fire. Right? That was the instruction from the
But
IG.
the mob seems to have grown out of control. We'll play a quick video for you to see some of the looting that is taking place.
Mm.
Now we have another topic that is related to this looting. We'll be discussing that next next week on Thursday. But right now it's about what is actually going on. We'll be right back shortly after this. Now, a lot of government warehouses have been broken into. People were not sated with looting those warehouses. They've now gravitated towards private warehouses, like you mentioned, the Sonics Electronics in Lagos. We've heard reports out of Benin City. We've heard reports out of Calabar. We've heard reports out of Jos. We've heard reports out of Ilorin in Kwara State. If the police have been told to stand down and not a case of they should abandon their duty posts, how do they control such a mob as you have?
So then you have now got to the heart of the problem, which is that Nigerian law enforcement, specifically the police, has only one tool in its arsenal, and that tool is shooting people, right? Which is not supposed to be the case. So this comes back to the basic problem of training and equipment, right? The Nigerian police, first of all, are not trained to de-escalate anything. The Nigerian police are trained to just use force, brute force. They are trained to act like a vigilante militia. They're not trained to act like an actual police force. If you are familiar with how police forces are trained, not just in developed countries, even in countries like Egypt, which is 3 borders away from us, it's a completely different skill set to that which you see every day on the streets in Nigeria, which is people walking around with military grade rifles, and threatening to shoot you. That's not what the police force is meant to do, right? They stuff like I remember the protest that I was at in Abuja, because I actually traveled to Abuja to join the protest. When they weren't in the mood to shoot people, they actually had the ability to disperse crowds, right? They used their water cannons, they they chased us with horse trips, even though that wasn't, they're not supposed to do that. But I guess that's still
I was
preferable to
actually
shoot.
I was actually surprised to see that they had water cannons, to be honest.
Yeah, they actually do have that equipment, but in Abuja, they don't. It's in Lagos, maybe they do, but it's not like a widespread thing that is available across Nigeria. Most police units in Nigeria just have AK-47s and that's it, just rifles. So obviously, when your only tool is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. So which is why now, as far as the police are concerned, the police are actually very frustrated because they're like, well, we're damned if you do, we're damned if you don't. If we come out and do our job, they will say, why are you shooting people? If we don't do our if we stay away as we're doing now, they say the police is staying away. Because they have not been trained in such a way as to carry out their job without escalating violence. Right. So tactics like kettling large groups of people, using like riot shields, you know, herding large groups of people away from certain places without shooting them. The Nigerian police has no idea how to do those things.
Hello?
All they do is
Okay, we seem to have had a small internet issue there. Lost connection with David for a few seconds.
hello. Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Yes, you're back. We can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, so I was saying like stuff like kettling large groups of people using riot
Yeah.
shields, herding them away from locations without shooting them. The Nigerian police has never been taught these things. They have no idea, and they don't even have the equipment to do these things. All they have is guns, right? So as far as they're concerned, if they shoot in the air and then people are not running away, then the next thing is to start shooting at people, and then that's what will make the other people run away when they see if
But
one or
but
two.
but the Nigerian police used to have those capabilities because initially the anti-riot squad was formed to deal with such issues, and they were trained. Because
Exactly,
I remember seeing the anti-riot squad come out using shields, helmets for their own
exactly,
protection, and then dating for further
exactly,
protection, self-protection, and they were able to
exactly,
disperse large crowds. But all of a sudden, it's now a case of anti-riot policemen are now acting as bodyguards to
exactly.
individuals.
Exactly. So the people who are trained to do these things, because by the way, that training is quite expensive. Those assets, as they're called, are used to make money. So they are seconded to high profile individuals, high net worth individuals, celebrities and whatnot who will pay. And they pay quite a fair amount. It's quite if you want to get a police orderly in Nigeria, at the very least, if you're getting like a basic corporal who doesn't have much training, you are paying at least 30,000 naira a month. If you are getting one of these like anti-riot police managers, you could be paying them 100,000 plus a month. So it's a very lucrative financial scheme for the police, which let me not also neglect to mention is a severely underfunded institution in Nigeria. Because you can't really have this conversation without mentioning that the police is severely underfunded, right? It's let me not say it's not their fault, right? But it's not entirely their fault. Like, and this is not a defense
Well,
of them in any way, right?
yeah,
But there are certain circumstances that almost make it inevitable that these things will happen. Like I've had conversations over the past few weeks with people who are actually in the know, people who are within the police system, and I discovered some things that I didn't know before, and it made me realize that well, it's very easy to hate them because you and I know that they don't they don't the way they act, in their day to day when they're doing their day to day jobs doesn't make them any friends, right? They act like bullies. We know this very well. However, when you also get to know that even they themselves, at an institutional level, they are also bullied by other arms of the Nigerian government, then you start to get a bigger
yeah.
picture of that it isn't just a police problem. It isn't just that the police force is corrupt. It is corrupt, and it is it's not fit for purpose. But it's not just the police; it's the entire structure of the Nigerian federal government.
There's
I
a
was speaking,
systemic rot.
exactly. I was speaking to someone recently who informed me, to my amazement, that even within the Senate, right, senators are paid a huge sum of money, as we all know. Senators are not hurting for cash in any way, right? But if the police wants to like there's their annual budget, for example. The police wants to get their
Yeah.
annual budget, like the Senate Committee on Police Affairs. The police has to meet with them, obviously. They have to interface with them to get their budget passed and whatnot. Money has to change hands. I didn't know this before. The
Oh,
senators,
so
the
people are
senators will
complaining.
demand
People are complaining about the police being the corrupt ones
extortion,
and extorting money from people.
extort
So
the police as
Nigeria
well.
police get Oga.
This is not
So
something that you hear very often, but unfortunately, that's the case.
the
Okay,
what?
I
The
seem to have
National
lost
Assembly
you.
extorts the Nigerian police.
Hello,
I can hear you loud and clear.
hello.
I can hear you. I can hear you, David. Hello, hello,
Oh
David.
dear.
Hello, hello, David.
Yes, I can hear you now.
I think. All right. Yeah. So I was saying, sorry about that lost connection. I said
Yeah,
so. The Nigerian police is being
yeah.
extorted by the National Assembly.
Not just the National Assembly, by all sorts of civilians that they interact with on a daily basis who are supposed to regulate them. So, for example, like this is, and these things I was told like on by someone who is in the know, right? So this isn't like I heard from somewhere. This is from a very reliable source. The Every police station in Nigeria is supposed to be audited. It's actually a law that is written in the Police Act that every police station is supposed to be audited, financially audited. And yet, it will surprise you to know that when auditors are moving around from auditors are civilians, by the way, they are not police officers. And when they are moving around
Okay.
from police division to police division, instead of looking through the books and auditing the police, they will simply go and meet the DPO or whoever, the commander, and say, bring 100,000, bring 200,000, depending on how they assess, the ability of the police in that area to pay. Bring 100,000 and we sign the paper. Bring 200,000, we sign the paper. And that's how it works. These are
This is
civilians.
explosive. This is explosive, David. I've never even heard anything close to this before, ever.
Exactly. These are civilians. These are not police officers. So it's not just the failing of the Nigerian police, it's a huge systemic failing of the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government at every level is an extremely corrupt institution at every level. And the police is just like the grinding face of it because they are the ones that you interact with every day. They are the ones on your streets that you see every day. Right? The entire institution is horrible. The entire Nigerian federal government needs reform. But it's unfortunate we don't get to hear these stories very often. And it's the police themselves are not allowed to come out and tell these
We
stories.
seem to have lost that connection with David again.
Oh dear.
We're sorry about that. But whilst we're trying to get David back, we're going to play another short video. Nigerians are lovely people. Nigerians are very hospitable people. And Nigerians are extremely proud of the fact that they are Nigerians. Watch this short clip to see what we're talking about. Hi, David. Good to have you back.
Hi. Sorry, I didn't know you.
Your picture seems to be frozen, and we lost connection with you there for a second or two.
Right. Sorry about that.
So I don't know. I mean, this is Nigeria. Aside that, it happens in different parts of the world as well. So it's not bad. Now, I don't know if you saw the last video that we just played a few seconds ago about Nigerians and how resilient they are and how much they love Nigeria, especially this young generation. And they've been doing a lot of great stuff. You can see them in the tech sector. You can see them in the entertainment sector. And they're giving so much back to the country. But they're not given an opportunity to express themselves. What next for this NSAS protest?
I think, honestly, for now, it has to focus on the online elements. It has to focus on the media elements. Something that is that Nigerians expect fishes to fly, right? Nigerians are very angry with their traditional media for not covering the protests or for not covering the protests the way they would like. And what I kept on saying was that, well, the traditional media is not really working for you because you haven't paid for it. And a lot of people chose to misunderstand what that statement meant. But what it simply meant was that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. Now, the federal government is by far Nigeria's biggest advertising spender in terms of media, buying. By far, bigger than any private sector organization. Federal government spends the most on media advertising, and that advertising revenue is the bedrock of traditional media revenue in Nigeria. The business model depends on advertising revenue. So, if the federal government is basically responsible for 30 or 40% of my revenue, then why am I going to, they don't even have to tell me not to report critically on them. They don't even have to tell me. I will know. I will self-censor, and that's what happens. So when I tell people that the government is in control of Nigeria's traditional media, it doesn't mean that DSS is going around pointing guns at people's faces and saying, "Don't report this." That doesn't really happen. But it's very subtle like that. They self-censor because they already know. Like, for example, when Punch newspaper did what they did a few months ago, and they said that they're going to start referring to the president as Major General instead of president, because it was a protest about his refusal to obey court orders. So they put out an editorial stating that henceforth we will not refer to him as Mr. President, we refer to him as Major General Buhari. And after that happened, they lost all their government advertising revenue. They lost all their government pulled out, not federal and state governments, in fact, pulled out all their advertising from Punch newspaper. And as a result, as I'm talking to you, Punch cut nearly half of its newsroom.
Wow.
Because that's the reality. So, and Punch could even do that because it's Punch. Punch is a very financially robust organization. So even though they had to cut their newsroom, they still, they can still keep going. They can still keep operating, right? Most newspapers aren't even as powerful as Punch. Punch has by far Nigeria's largest daily circulation. The others couldn't dare to pull such a stunt. So if you want the NSARS movement to keep on, to not lose steam, right? To continue being in the consciousness of young Nigerians, both locally and internationally, What we have to do, which people don't want to hear, but I'll keep on saying it, is crowdfund our own media, such that it doesn't depend on government revenue or revenue from one rich allergy somewhere to keep operating,
Right.
right? For crowdfund your own. So Business Day is trying to do something like that. How successful it is remains to be seen. They're trying to push their subscription-based model, right? I think it's another 2 or 3 months before they review it to know how successful that has been. Because I believe it was 2 or 3 months ago they locked all the content on their website behind the paywall. Right?
Yeah,
They've
I
been
noticed there was.
experimenting.
I,
Yeah,
I noticed that they're trying to put up a paywall.
yes, they locked everything behind the paywall now because they're like, well, journalism is expensive, so if you want it, you have to pay for it. I agree with that, although I'm not so sure how successful that has been. We shall see. But beyond that, because you could still classify Business Day as traditional media, as regular print media. I'm thinking more of like purely online based media, right? Whose journalists or whoever are not drawn from the conventional, Nigerian journalism and media core, right? People
Yeah.
whose loyalty, is not to the establishment. Let me just put it that way, right? Because
Like us on from a radio.
hopefully, yes. You understand?
Yeah.
Independent people who, even if they have had experience within the traditional media space in Nigeria, that loyalty is not to that constituency and is not to patrons in government and in the private sector. Their loyalty is to their craft. Currently,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist because the business model makes it impossible for that to exist. So if you want NSTARS to not die, because in many ways, even though people are trying to not, in many ways it's already dying. Whether we want to accept that or not, in many ways it's already dying because I think a lot of people have already psychologically accepted that well, this is how this country is, and they moved on. I personally know people who said as much to me. Quite a number of people actually that well, I've accepted this is what Nigeria is. So they're either just going to move on like that or they're going to leave the country. There are many people
Oh wow.
who have given up psychologically like that. So if we don't want that to happen, if you
We're
want
sorry
NSAS,
for the breaking transmission.
oh,
Like
not
we said
again.
earlier on, this is technology. The internet can break up at any point in time. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're in Nigeria. It has nothing to do with the fact. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're at two different ends of the country or of the world. Technology is technology. It's made by people, and sometimes it can hang.
Are
While
we
we're
back
trying
now?
to, David, we still can't see you, but we can hear. We can hear you.
Right. Okay. Right. Do I continue or
Yes, please. I mean, just go ahead. We're listening. We're all ears.
right? Okay. So just to conclude the thought I was expressing, that if you want NSARS to not die the death it has already started dying, then we need to be intentional about crowdfunding our own media platforms, and that means web, that means radio, that means web TV, all sorts of things. Like sort
Yeah.
of like saturate our own space, our own social media space, with our own content that is relevant to us instead of government funded content which is basically press releases from this ministry or that department or that MDA, which is what 70% of our traditional news is, right? Because it's paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, have it be sort of like what Premium Times was at launch. I'm not so sure, whether that is what Premium Times still is, but close to what it was at launch, or close to what Sahara Reporters was at launch in 2009. Sort of like purely people focused web journalism. So if few people are trying to do something in that space, I know Samuel Ogundikwe who left Premium Times recently. He set up an online newspaper called the People's Gazette, and they have been doing some good
Okay.
work. They have been doing some solid reporting actually on this NSTARS protests. I know Arise TV as well has been doing some solid work on the NSAS protest, even though they are. I don't think you would really classify them as independent. They are owned by a traditional media person, but they have done some good work. Um, Obviously, at Newswire, which I'm leaving at the end of this month, they do some really good work. Normally, and they're still doing some very good work. I'm going to miss it when I leave. Even Premium Times as well is
Yeah. A lot
So
of people do depend on Premium Times or the likes of Premium
exactly,
Times, for
exactly.
their information with the hope that they're unbiased. So,
So
we,
essentially, it's an information warfare. The Nigerian army fights its own end of the battle, and we are fighting our own end of the battle. So the Nigerian army is obviously a very well funded institution that can buy as much space as it wants in all the traditional and social media spaces.
oh,
So we need to do ours basically. We need to continue doing what we did during the protest actually, which was we crowdfunded our own protest. We raised almost 100 million naira, didn't we? So I mean, who says we can't do more?
yes, you can do more, a lot more. And I know a lot of young people who are still trying their best to give, even though things seem to be on the downward spiral. They are still working hard to try to see if they can keep the movement going. One of them is a young singer called TY. So I first met TY when she started her initial campaign, which was a campaign against rape. And right now, she's done another song in support of the End SARS movement. We're going to play her track, Sorosuke. So she named it, which is in support of the End SARS movement. Just to conclude this show, we'll be right back. Hello, David.
Hi.
Oh, well, we seem to have lost David again.
Oh
So,
no.
beautiful
Okay.
song by TY, handle on official. I think we are struggling to get David back. We do hope we get him back because we'd like to thank David very much for coming on the show, taking up the time to do the usual 1 hour plus that we
I
do
can hear you
instead of
perfectly
an
though.
hour. Oh, David, that's fantastic. So, unfortunately, we can't see you. But I was just thanking you for coming on the show. And also, I hope you saw the song, and I hope
Yeah.
young continuously be encouraged by their peers, by their friends, and by their family to keep giving back and keep trying to keep this NSAS protest going. Nigeria is one of the greatest countries in the world. 1 out of 7 black people in the world is Nigerian. We do leave an impact everywhere we go. It's time to make an impact in Nigeria, and Nigerians need to come together and start working towards making Nigeria a livable, safe space for everybody. Thank you so much, David. We hope we'll have you on again sometime soon. And it's a shame we can't see your face before you go.
I hope so too. And yeah,
Hello.
blame the internet for that.
Are you there, David?
Hello. Yes, I'm here. I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay, we can hear you now. So sorry that we can't see your face and the picture has disappeared. But it's been fantastic having you on the show. And we hope to have you
Yeah.
on again sometime soon. In the
I hope to be
meantime,
on there. Thanks for having me.
in the meantime, we would appeal to everybody that is watching this show, anybody that you know, please talk to them, friends and family. The looting needs to stop. We need to have a safe space to live. Everybody is suffering, regardless of how rich or poor you are. We all understand that. But we are not going to get anything out of hurting each other. We're only going to hurt each other much more by looting. We're sorry people are going through hunger. We're sorry that people are suffering so much. Please, please, please stop the looting. And we also deeply, deeply commiserate with those people who have lost their lives. Their families, we're so sorry that you're going through so much pain. Nigeria will be great again, especially because some people have sacrificed their lives. Thank you very much, everybody. You have a great evening, and we hope to see you again on Thursday when we discuss the COVID-19 palliatives that are being discovered in different warehouses across the country. Have a great night. Good night, everyone.